Thank you as well, Grant, for kind of signing in wherever you are in the world today. Where are you today,
Yeah,
Grant?
so at the moment it's 8 o'clock in St. Bart's in the Caribbean. But nothing could be more important to me whilst I'm on the other side of the world than a talk for the BWA. So here I am, as agreed.
No, it's great that you can join us. And this is obviously our second webinar on our program around well-being, which is a program that we're really keen to support as a BWA. It's not our normal program of webinars, but I think that's always focused on technical tax matters and support. But I think as we've said before, this is a program close to our heart, and we wish to and want to support. And it's great to have you on board, Grant. So without further ado, I'll hand you over to yourself. We don't want to take too much of your valuable time in the Caribbean there, but a great way of actually supporting health and well-being, which is you can be in the Caribbean and be with us today and promote health and well-being within the business place. So I think it's a cracking backdrop. So over to you, Grant.
It's all right. I'm a bit of a novice at screen sharing, so let me know when it goes wrong.
No worries.
Here we go. So, look. Have you got that there then?
Yep.
Brilliant. Yep. Okay. Well, as you said, now don't forget as well, it's the budget. A little bit disoriented with the time difference, but the budget today. And so with that in mind, and I know a lot of your talks are on financial, economic and legislative matters, but actual fact, without a workforce, you stand very little chance of delivering on any of those previous points and factors. So, and this is not about bending over backwards to actually achieve this, but if we don't look a little bit further down the line, rather than looking at the page in front of us, we might have to turn a chapter or two ahead to see where this is all heading in order to actually ensure that the businesses within the BWA have got the necessary resilience. And as I said, and I always say, actually, whilst health is your most important factor as an individual and to enable your workforce, it doesn't have to be the most expensive factor whatsoever. And it can actually, you can get some really good value ROI on some pretty simple stuff, which also, and it's not just about throwing money at inverted commas health or indeed well-being, but you can get a lot of mileage for your money if you do it in a sensible way. And what we're really opening people's awareness of right now is that the old way of doing things is the redundant way of doing things. We saw last time that sickness absence rates have been going down for the last 20 years, but since COVID, they have been more than doubling every year since the end of the pandemic. And yet a lot of businesses are still applying pre-COVID methods of working and dealing with workforce and staff in a post-COVID era, and it's just not working. And the statistics are telling us that. And so what I'm inviting people to embrace and have at least awareness of is a different way of thinking. And this doesn't always mean speaking to the normal social narratives, because we're more of a progressive organisation than that. And I'm going to be promoting some better ways of working. So without further ado, let's see if I can get this off the ground. You will be, it's very rare these days that Britain is the #1 at anything. And there was a report. You can all tell your respective other halves and workforce that you're now starting to take on board information from the Lancet as part of your daily reading, thanks to D4Drivers. But it won't come as any surprise that we're not only are we not #1 in healthy life expectancy ratings for Western Europe, we are actually the worst, the bottom. It can't get any worse. So healthy life expectancy is basically the age at which we encounter our first significant health condition, which will modify our life expectancy. How long do we live a healthy life until we start to get unwell? Now these figures, and if I may just say as a quick aside, if I mention she or he, please just apply that in a very global, one applies to the other. All the statistics come from the Office of National Statistics and Statista, so they're all validated statistics. They don't come off Wikipedia or anything like that. So we're looking at, in the UK, for women, specific to women this is, So the average age of the first major health condition, so they live healthy up to an average age of 55 years. And thereafter, they are living with or despite a health condition for the rest of their working lives. Now, this is where I'm going to bring in some visibility about the socioeconomic factors, and this will bear relevance vis-a-vis the budget today. But actually, for those of you who've got multiple site locations across the UK, you've got to have visibility that actually those that are located in the poorest areas have de facto the worst health conditions. And this is entirely, so we've got the intrinsic, your common or garden health factors, which we all know about, hypertension I've mentioned, and all the rest of it, diabetes. But then you have to bear in mind and overlay the socioeconomic and demographic factors specific to your workplace in the UK. And that is to say, so you can see the poorest area in the UK, the age at which a major health condition it onsets, the average age 47. So you can see the difference of 8 years between those in well-off areas and those in poor areas. I mean, that's nearly a decade of healthy or otherwise non-healthy living, and that's purely based on your postcode. So you've got to bear in mind that when you're rolling out a national strategy to workforce management, you need to put a filter across that, which includes consideration of the locations of where your sites are based and what have you. Because if people are getting unwell 8 years earlier in one location than another, then applying the same metrics or expectations or recruitment methods has to be modified, because it's such a gross difference in our health metrics. So we've got all the usual suspects, as it were, obesity, and I'm not going to bore you too much. I do love a graph so that we can all just see something more visual, and I'll come on to these without too much delay, so don't worry. But these are the 6 main factors. Whilst D4Drivers used to specialise mainly in drivers, and all of these factors like inactivity and obesity and hypertension, diabetes, all very relevant to driving. Actually, what we're looking at now is warehouse workers and logistics generally are affected by a great multitude of these factors. And we've got the chronic respiratory stuff isn't necessarily to do with vaping now. It's all to do with historic smoking when people were younger, when you could go into Curry's to buy a television and have a cigarette across the sales desk with the sales representative. Some people will remember that, and Rumbelows and those other now extinct organisations. But smoking in court, smoking on a plane, it was all perfectly acceptable. So a lot of people in their later working life are being affected by conditions which essentially are catching up with them from their earlier lifestyles. So and the only thing we can do about that is not make it any worse. And what I've done a lot of work on recently is actually there's a lot more respiratory conditions actually affecting logistics and warehouse workers because of things like dust, because of even, you believe it or not, even the rubber tires on forklifts create, as they degrade just through normal use, create rubber dust. If you've got unsealed concrete flooring, the concrete dust causes chronic respiratory problems. Some of these, like silicosis, are absolutely irreversible, where you actually get a hardening, a concrete-like hardening of the tubes in the lung. So your actual lungs start to sort of concrete and solidify, all because of things like traffic over unsealed concrete floors and what have you. And that's before you get into the loading and unloading and things which have been stored for a long time, which have gathered lots of dust. So all these can set off asthma type conditions. That's just a little brief aside. So just these are sort of things that that we increasingly frequently seeing. The other thing to say, for those of you who are in an HR management role, is we are seeing more and more that as workforces change, so perhaps somebody drops out for a week or for a month due to a prolonged health condition, other people are filling the gaps. So there is, what we're seeing more and more now is that people's roles and responsibilities do not always reliably bear resemblance to what the HR manager in head office has recorded in their HR file. People covering each other's works don't necessarily have all the same training. We've also seen different methods of working. So people haven't been shown how to do something properly. So they've just adopted a technique which isn't safety rated or risk rated. And so you've then got probably about between 15 and 18% of people who are either working in a way which is different to what their role originally stated way back when they joined the company, or that they are using tools which have been repurposed, so things which aren't risk rated, or they're working in methods and processes which are not what was originally intended. So you're knocking on the door of about 20% of the workforce, and all this is because of workforce transience, people being off work, not having good systems in place for training. And actually, it was a really healthy thing that we're finding for those in the management sector of businesses to actually do a walkabout from time to time and just see what on earth, what is going on with the workforce, because what we're seeing is it's leading to health conditions, an increase in accidents, and a slight uptick in claims for people being injured at work. And it's all because of this migration away from that original pure intent as the role was intended. So just to sort of develop on these factors. So what you've got here, when you look at anybody's role and when you look at the working cohort, so what I'm advocating here is that in the BWA, you've got your company. That might be one or multiple sites. It might be one or multiple businesses within a group. So what I am advocating is actually just think of from the ground up and from the top down. So from the ground up, you look at the individual worker, and you'll have too many workers to individualize this everywhere in every case, most likely. But if you look at all the different domains of working, so you'll have your different workforce cohorts, and pick one or two people out of each one just to give them individual consideration, because these are case study examples of what the wider cohort are most likely doing. So you've got the person, then you've got to look at think about who they are in their own familial situation. So you've got people who might be live on their own. They might live across different families. They might be financially supporting more than one family. They might be going through a divorce. All these are factors which affect people's resilience and work fortitude, as it were. And then you've got to consider about the community where they live, and that will have its own demographic and health-related factors. So to bear in mind, and there are some communities which have got very different social habits to others. Some are very inclusive. In other cases, people are more isolated. Then you've got to think of yourself as how your company makes up the industry of the BWA, and as part of the wider logistics and warehousing industry. And then you've got to sort of zoom all the way out to actually looking at how society is functioning these days. And for anyone who's been in business for longer than 5 to 10 years, it's a very different society. I'm going to come on to this. It's a very different society than the one when you might have started work. When back in the day, when Clive went round and lit the gas lamps and so forth. It's a very different day that he's now logging on, and I'm speaking from the other side of the world. So what I'm saying is, we can't keep applying these old methods of thinking when the societal expectations are very different. Industry is working under very different dynamic factors, and I'm sure after today's budget, people will be using references to mental health at an increasing an alarming rate. But I'm going to come on to mental health as well, because we'll do a bit of myth busting on that one. And actually, people don't work in their communities like they used to. People don't necessarily know their neighbours. Families are more broken or blended, and the individual, there's a sort of top-down pressure on individuals to meet demands that on their own or off their own back that they might 10 years ago it might not have had to do, or might have had more support with doing. So you've got to bear in mind that the world is changing, And I'm not suggesting that we should individualize a role for each and everybody. Quite the opposite. I think we should support them to meet the needs of that role, but just shouting at them to work harder, turn up, and work longer hours or in a different way. We've got to go about it in a much more subtle and crafted way than just giving them the job description, pat them on the back, and put them on the machine or what have you. So there is a lot more consideration to the processes which get them into a role. First of all, selecting them in the role, get them in the role, support them in the role, ensure they're resilient in the role, get the best productivity in the role, and make sure that you don't have to recruit somebody again tomorrow to fulfill the role because they've left. So all these factors are costly factors in terms of time and money for all members of the BWA. So just, I'm not telling everybody all of these things all at once, but fundamentally, I'm just advocating, start to shift your thinking. We all use iPhones. We can all manage to migrate. Our other phones are available, of course, but we can all shift our methods of working. We can't just keep using these old approaches to a society which fundamentally has long moved on since we first developed these methods of working. So here come the graphs, just to give you a bit of a variety. What you can see here, so the number one limitation on workforce health from a physical point of view now and going forwards is going to be obesity. We are starting to see, and we've just will the D4Drivers be the only company coming up with a proper nationwide offer for obstructive sleep apnea diagnosis. So now we'll be releasing a deal where you can use disposable kits just for one night, which Bluetooth into your iPhone together with a questionnaire. You can get this diagnosed in just one night. At a matter of, I think it's about £160 or something like that, just for so no prolonged or protracted diagnostic processes, and you can get the kits within 48 hours. You can get and within 24 to 48 hours of doing the test, you get the diagnosis. And this is the brilliant thing, you don't need to lose your license in the slightest. Because we all know that's the number one fear amongst drivers, and why they don't volunteer details about sleep apnea honestly and accurately, because of the fear of losing their license. And that is actually, if once you on board with the treatment, it just takes one letter to say they've been diagnosed, they've been treated, they're compliant with their treatment, and the DVLA just write back and just say, that's fine. They just need to keep getting treated. And treatment means not every day. You just need to use your about on 80% of your night's sleep to use the CPAP machine. And the other good thing for people is that because sleep apnea qualifies under the Equality Act, that they don't charge VAT on the cost of a CPAP machine either for those individuals who buy them. If you buy it through a company, so you get the VAT back anyway because it's an occupational health thing. What you can see here is there is an upward trend in the last 20 years of people getting larger. And I'm afraid we just can't talk our way out of this. And I'm afraid that the marketing for KFC is always going to be stronger than that for Bannatynes or Pure Gym, David Lloyd, or any other gym membership that might be available. And that is also links to the amount of inactivity that we now embrace as standard within our life. So I mean, that is something that is not in the hands of the BWA to undo, but actually there is also when it comes to getting a safety and health risk assessment. Larger people do present more safety risks, and that might be an ingress or egress from the cab or a forklift. It might be due to working at height and going up ladders. There's a great number, but then there's also these proliferated medical conditions that are linked to obesity, like hypertension and type 2 diabetes, all of which increase people's prospective risk of dying at the wheel, essentially. So on a more positive note, let's move on. This will just tell you, and this is why it's going to be a really good idea. And Clive, I'm going to speak to you about a BWA offer so that people can easily just check their blood pressure out. This is not for a regulatory failure for people to fail their HGV class 2 or anything like that. What I'm saying to people is, by the time you're having your medical for HGV class 2, then about 15% of people are already failing because they've got raised blood pressure. And let me tell you, your blood pressure for the class 2 to fail is 180 over 100. Now, that is a very high blood pressure already. That is a pre-cataclysmic blood pressure. So if you're failing that at the age of 45, your blood pressure is already in a terrible state. Now, if you went to your doctor, your GP, any blood pressure over 140 over 90, they're going to start doing tests on you. They're going to diagnose you with blood pressure problems. They're going to probably give you treatment and monitor you. So that's 140 over 90. So by the time you fail your group 2 at 180 over 100, you've already sailed by several years past the time when you should have been diagnosed and started treatment. So, Clive, I'm going to speak to you about getting blood pressures monitored in the workplace, and the BWA will be the first industry organisation to actually achieve this. And it's so cheap. It is so cheap. It actually, for the cost of a family mega bucket, you can buy a blood pressure machine. One will kill you and one will save you, and I'll let you work out which. So looking at the graph, so you've got 2/3 of men, and believe it or not, 3/4 of women have got normal blood pressure, don't need treatment. Okay. So then you've got the next column from the left. 11% of men have got blood pressure, and 9% of women have got blood pressure. It's been diagnosed, it's treated. Okay. So then next column, the third and middle column, they've got blood pressure and it's not, so it's diagnosed, but it's not properly treated. So they're not taking enough medication, they're not doing enough exercise, they're not compliant with their medication, you know, that sort of thing. People who've had the diagnosis but not gone back to the doctor to get it properly sorted. So there we are, we've got 8% of men there who are got blood pressure not controlled. So that's a problem. Then you've got the fourth column, 15% of people who've got males, blood pressure, 12% of females. So these are the people who have got blood pressure and nothing is being done about it. So theoretically, they should be 2 columns to the left. They should be diagnosed and controlled. These are people who are basically undiagnosed, most likely. They're walking around, they've got the problem. The first thing they will find out about it is, if they're lucky, they will fail their medical, and that will flag it to them. If they are unlucky, the first thing they'll find out about this untreated blood pressure problem is that they will have a heart attack or stroke. So that is, for a lot of people, regrettably, the first thing they know about the problem that they had of untreated blood pressure. So, and it's, I mean, as a doctor in hospitals and a GP, you know, you see this all the time. And it used to be in people in their late 40s, rising 50s, and what have you. Now we're seeing this not in the 40s, but happening at an early age. And again, this is all linked to obesity. So the prevalence of heart attacks is happening to people in their 30s now, not in their 40s and 50s. So that's, and if you look, and just let's be real about this, women are not very far behind men in these stats. So when we think about people having heart attacks, it's vastly within society, and doctors are guilty of this too, is vastly under-recognised as a risk in women. So just because, you know, we always think about, oh, well, men die of heart attacks and women die much later. It's statistically, you know, we're not seeing that being so well supported these days. So just bear that in mind. You treat everyone equally in this respect. So then I'll move on to something that we've been doing a lot of work on at D4Drivers and our sister company D4 Health. Now, you'll see a lot of occupational health companies just telling you, oh, we can do mental health, you know, fix those problems. Look at this graph. Look at this graph. What it tells you is the people who have probably got genuine illness are in the 19%. They've got recurring medical conditions, asthma, angina. Now, these are people who've already got entrenched chronic health conditions, and they come in and out of work or in and out of full work or full-time work because of their limitation by their chronic health conditions. Okay, so these are the people who should have been dealt with. You know, if they dealt with 5 or 10 years ago, probably this number will be half or a third of what it currently is. Now, I'm going to make you look at stress. 37% of people on long-term absence have labelled stress as the cause. Okay. The middle column, 46%, again, these are ones which we could buy off the risk of in years to come. So you've got the 19% of recurring medical conditions on the right, you've got the middle column, 46%. And don't forget, of course, all this adds up to more than 100% because of, some people are off for more than one condition, okay? But the middle column, 46%, acute medical conditions. So, okay, again, a lot of these are, we can mitigate, we can prevent this. And these are all people who are taken out of the workforces of BWA members. So you can do something about this. But what I'm saying is you need to look at people not just dropping off the end of their working lives through health conditions. You need to become much more nearsighted and look at people when they're joining the company for longevity. And it's the preventing disease in their 30s that will enable them to work reliably into their 40s and 50s. Okay. So what you have got here, though, is mental health, mental ill health, and this is where the mislabeling starts. You've got clinical depression and anxiety. Now, let me tell you, and we'll get onto this, is that there is something to be said that there is a lot of mental health washing going on. Okay. And to be clear, that's basically to advocate that we stop mislabeling everything as this very broad and overly wide definitive term as mental health. Okay, it's not helpful for anybody. It's not constructive to managing a workforce. It doesn't respect the actual individualized needs of the worker, which may be completely misrepresented by this mental health washing. And we've also fallen into a trap in society generally of labeling our experiences completely incorrectly. So before I came on this call, I was speaking to a member of staff. We were having a really buoyant and enjoyable conversation. I asked him how he got on yesterday, and he said, "Oh, I nearly had a meltdown yesterday." And I said, "Well, what happened?" He said, "Oh, well, somebody was off work and I had to do extra work, and I nearly had a meltdown." So this is how people are labeling their experiences in the workplace. But then we had a very put your arm around him in a very supportive, conversational way, as one worker to another, and find out, well, what does that actually mean? He said, well, there were times when I was too busy to make a cup of tea or go to the loo. I said, but okay, how are you doing today? He said, well, today I'm much better. And don't forget, when people have a true meltdown, we're talking about an emotional implosion from which, you don't manifestly recover from some time without some intervention through therapy or medicine. That's what a proper breakdown is. The old-fashioned Dickensian breakdown is something that people were sort of incarcerated for in mental health institutions. And now we are using it to mislabel the experience of just one day at work. So we've got to be very careful about how we use this terminology. And I'm going to move on, end of the graphs, I'm afraid. So what we've got a big problem here is that people are simply are just using terminology without any critical thinking. So if I hadn't exercised any critical thinking, I could have blindly adopted the brief narrative that a lay employee had used in labeling himself as having a meltdown or a breakdown yesterday at work. Laughing and joking today, yesterday was a breakdown. So if we simply regurgitate that on our referral forms for occupational health, somebody's off and what have you, and just say, oh, they're having a breakdown or a meltdown or whatever, we're not helping anybody here by just repeating what the layperson has said without applying some critical thinking. Actually, let's ask people, and trust me, we do a lot of work with employment lawyers and HR advisors, where there is a trap that they can easily fall into, where you just blindly adopt what you've been told. But we are grown-ups, you are in a position of management and responsibility, and you have to exercise some critical thinking. Okay, so we just have to do a deeper dive drill down into what exactly are the operating factors as to why people have got that experience and why they've labeled it as that. And actually, if you tell people they're stressed, believe me, it is only a short cognitive hop to believing that and adopting that and entrenching yourself in that and repeating it to the next worker. So we could all be fearful about what the future holds and how difficult the day may be. But fundamentally, if we go around telling everybody we're worried, everybody will become worried. And this is very much like, hens in a hen house worried about a fox outside. Their anxiety propagates. So we must actually hold what people says, actually exercise a greater degree of a very responsible role and responsibility. Just hold that there. Right, let's look at this. I know you've chosen to use this label. What does it actually mean? What does it mean you're experiencing? So this, as I said, the error is in this sort of Chinese whispers style. I'm not sure, Clive, whether we can say other styles of whispering are also available, but let's just go with Chinese whispers, is that this erroneous, he's having a breakdown. Just this regurgitation of what the lay person with no clinical training, and I'll be honest with you, even mental health first aid training is not enough, because even that can get captured and absorbed by the mental health washing. So we need to be much more searching. Say, what does that mean you're feeling? What did your working day look like? And actually, when we look at this in a very objective and detailed and educated way, people can have the same exposures to workflow, work volume, work pressures in a day, and one day they'll cope fine, and one day they'll feel stressed, and another day they'll say that they feel overloaded. And it is nothing to do with the objective representation of work. It is all to do with the experiential, subjective narrative. And actually, a lot of that is determined by the amount of sleep they get, the quality of their relationships, what they feel about their finances, how they view their role within the organization and their prospects. And this all affects how they are thinking. So a good example is, so I live in Shropshire, and the other day, the water was off. You turn the tap on, no water. What's my first instinct to do? Complain. Why? Because I'm British. I'm paying my water rates and there's no water. So first thing I do is I go to complain. Then I just think about things, and I just think, well, I'll give it an hour, because I can afford to give it an hour and not be so critical about poor old Severn Trent. Anyway, an hour later, water's back on. Wasn't worth a complaint, wasn't worth getting upset about. So we have to, reassure ourselves that we don't have to go off and live with a sort of hair trigger of emotional representation, and that actually teaching our workforce just to hold that thought, hold that feeling for a minute. Let's come back to it, to circle back and see if we still feel the same in an hour, because we can have a bad hour but not a bad day. We can have a bad day but not a bad week. We can have a bad week but not have a bad month. If you're having a bad month for the second or third month running, then I think maybe you have got a problem, and we can own that. But let's not be too quick to judge. But if you think about that experience with Severn Trent, if they sent me a letter through the letterbox and said, between this time and that time, your water will be off, then my expectations would be entirely managed. And when the water was off, I wouldn't even think about complaining, because my experience had been my expectation had been managed, and I knew to expect it would be off. I wasn't surprised when it was off. I wasn't inconvenienced when it was off. I didn't need to think about making a complaint or going off and like a shot. And an hour later, the water was back on again. So we're going to use that as an example as to how we can propagate much better culture within your organizations. So looking at the bottom of this side, so people experience things differently and the same, and they can label things differently or the same. But most importantly, our society, our social media driven culture has taken people to readily misidentify, mistake and mislabel what are normal daily psychological experiences as pathology. So, for example, you're going to have a baby's going to be born. You're anxious about the outcome. Do you have anxiety as a diagnosable condition? No, you've got situational anxiety, which is a normal stress experience triggered by an event which happens to millions of people every day around the world. You're not diagnosed with anxiety. So we just need to move on from this. So next, go back to that expectation management. when you onboard somebody into your company, and this is also going to require some re-education of existing and long-standing workers, but actually what you think they know about your company might not what they think and know about your company. So you may have to actually go back to basics and start an internal plan of a strategy of re-educating people. Your company is not what it was 10 years ago. Your stresses have changed, your business dynamics have changed, your financial pressures have changed. How is your index worker on the shop floor supposed to know that? And what's important to you and your market and your role within the industry? So you're probably best off starting at the beginning and actually telling people who you are and what your values are and what you can expect of workers. And it's okay to tell people to expect it'll be busy sometimes. When you can see that things are, and this is why I'm inviting you to look further down the line. And for those of you who are bored already, don't worry, I'm nearly at the end. Look further down the line. If, for example, December is going to be a busy month, let's not wait for people to get stressed in December for you to say, well, you knew it would be a busy month. We need to be looking down the line, just like Severn Trent could have sent me that letter to manage my expectations. Let's start propagating internal information to manage people's expectations. People are going to be off with minor illnesses. You are going to have to cover other people's roles. But bear in mind, if it's you off with minor illnesses, it's somebody else having to cover your role. Do your best to get back when you feel safe to do so, because actually other people might be feeling the pressure. It's okay to say that. We are so afraid of upsetting people, but we can't be disingenuous and untrue to the reality of what working life is in the UK at this moment, be it in a bonded warehouse or out on the road or in any other role. The other thing is, we're seeing a lot in pre-placement medicals, which are literally, pounds, not hundreds of pounds. They're so cheap to do. We're seeing people with methods of working, attitudes and physical conditions, which are simply not compatible with the anticipated role. People who have got issues with genuine issues with managing stress. So that's not to say they got anxiety or anything diagnosable, but they just don't cope very well when they're asked to flex from one problem into a different situation. So they love the conveyor belt steady work. So don't put them into a role where it needs a lot of cognitive flexibility, or they're going to have to deal with members of the public who may or may not be presenting complaints to them as the first point of contact. Look at the strengths of your workers and look at the requirements of the role, and really ask yourself, is that the person? You might need to swap one person out of a role and into another, because some people just can't cope with sort of social and dynamic flexibility, but they can give you such good work and application and quality and kindness to the employees if they have a very steady and regular method of working. So when you change the work environment, it unsettles some people. They won't say it to you, but they exhibit it then as stress, which they don't necessarily identify, but then they become argumentative or oppositional. You've also got to ask yourself, some employees want progression and some really don't. And you've got to work out through annual or more regular appraisals. I'm not asking you to ask your employees to tell you how to run your business. But fundamentally, if you've got people who can just see a little bit of progression coming down the line, and that ticks a big box for them, you'd be mad not to search out and have that inquiring mind as to what they want. And some people, just give me Monday to Friday, some overtime on a Saturday, and I will give you the next 10 years of my working life. So, but people who want a more dynamic and opportunistic employment, that's going to kill them and turn them off. But, sometimes we're afraid to ask the questions in case we're not sure how we're going to deal with what they say. We're grown-ups, of course we can deal with what they say, but we're better informed in knowing what their narrative is. You see, good example of hot desking, okay? We say, oh, well, any person can work from anywhere at any time. Some people hate this. They love the secure and warm feeling of routine. Then they go to their desk, they open their top left-hand drawer, and they know that that's where their custard creams are and the postcards of where they went on holiday, and they've got the pictures of the children on the desk and so forth. Some drivers will say, oh, give me that lorry, not the other one, because they've attached some physical feeling of security and habitualization to working in a certain way. So far as you can, you're better off embracing that, rather than, if these are habitual workers who want to work in that way, well, look, see how you can assign a method of working which best suits and reinforces their resilience. Most of us won't admit that financial insecurity causes us a lot of difficulty in the way that we see our work and our position within the workplace. So actually, that goes back to how we feel about prosperity and so forth. And people who feel that they can be easily replaced, even if they can be, they don't need to feel that way. People who feel valued in the workplace, and that costs nothing for somebody in management just to reach out, having known and identified a period of high performance within a warehouse or logistics time, and actually reaching out on a personal note to say, we know it was busy last week. You guys did a really good job. And in brackets, look, they may well not have succeeded in quite the way you'd hoped. But if you keep drilling down on them, they're not going to get that, what I say at the bottom here, intermittent reinforcement. Every time I go to the fridge, my dogs line up. Why? Because I'm silly enough to, whenever I cut off a piece of cheese or a piece of ham or something like that, I stupidly give them a little piece, and that intermittently reinforces them to keep turning up at the fridge every time they hear the fridge door opening. Now, every time someone gets some praise, it gives them that warm feeling. And fundamentally, if we love to receive praise. And if we receive this intermittently, that means to say that you can actually present them with some negative feedback. You can actually give them a bit of a negative, a bit of a rollicking from time to time when things do, or share with them things didn't go well. We do need to make deadlines better or what have you. But if you intermittently reinforce, oh, but by the way, what you did was really good, or I saw that you've achieved this and you worked really well in that intermittent reinforcement cost nothing. But actually, if you sat those workers down with a psychologist, who would very quickly drag out that intermittent reinforcement is as valuable as any pay rise. Okay, so I'll go back to the third point, conditioning. Now, if you join the armed forces, they don't just put you on the front line on day one. There's a lot of acclimatization, and they're very good at conditioning. So when you get a worker, you need to do a lot of acclimatization, far more in this societal expectant narrative than you ever would with a worker 20 or 30 years ago. Before 30 years ago, sign here, pick up your boots, get to work, keep working. Now you are going to have to put your arm around people a lot more because of the way they are brought up and how they are exposed to expectations through social media and societal expectations, or lack of expectations generally. So conditioning, you don't just throw them in the deep end. Most of them will sink and not enjoy swimming. So you will have to look more carefully at not a phased progress of work, but not putting them in the most stressful situations straight away. So the stressful, you need to identify where the most high stress situations where you can't have them letting you down are, and build up to them. And you need to either do that by incremental exposure or by having people support them and positively reinforcing their good behavior. You need to do, and all of this costs nothing bar a little bit of thinking. And in the time that it's taken you to listen to my or you may say waffle, but some may say quite insightful and progressive thinking. But in this, if you just sat down for an hour and looked at your workforce, looked at your different sites, looked at your different cohorts of workers and their work, you could easily come up with 3 or 4 touch points, which would mean a lot to them in terms of how they valued their role and the business. Think about how you can educate them internally about the expectations of the business. If it's going to be busy, tell them there'll be times when it'll be busy. You might think this is stress, but it's not stress. It's just a normal endorphin releasing chemical experience, which is a positive one associated with exercise and good experience. And stress can release endorphins as well. And just be careful. Just because it feels busy doesn't mean to say it ever gets stressful. So always wear a smile. Ask for help if you need it. Come and talk to me if you're in difficulty, but it's not stress, it's just busy. And the way you communicate this will be tailored to the type of worker that you've got or the workforce. But again, it's something that a more advanced occupational health provider can help you tailor, because what you think, and we do surveys in the workforce, and what you think is a workforce problem, as you see it, if you actually did a workforce survey, what you think is an issue, they're not even looking at that. They're more distracted by something completely, that would completely blindside you. But of course, there's a fear of if we ask a question, we might be told stuff that we don't want to hear or can't deal with. Of course you can deal with it. You're grown ups and you're in a position of responsibility, and you're in that position of responsibility through your knowledge and experience and capability. So you always have to reinforce your own ability as managers and leaders that actually, of course, you can deal with this. Most people struggle with the anticipation of change. Once it's changed, look, we're all anticipant about what's in the budget. But once you actually get told this is what's happening and this is how it's going to be, oh, okay, this is how we have to do it. We just double our tax payments or whatever it is. So it's the anticipation of change that you need to support people through. They can cope with change and working and living in a different environment. So you mustn't ever worry about that. This is the final point now. Going back to mental health washing and this blind regurgitation of the lay narrative, psychological experiences tells us that some days we'll be sitting in traffic and we're not at work, and we can find, we're not happy commuting. When we look at our bank balance, our credit card statement, we can go home, how our kids talk to us. It could all be different or kinder, perhaps. But that doesn't mean to say that this can all be encapsulated in a diagnostic label of clinical value, which requires a clinician to make that diagnosis and not a layperson to actually just slap a label on what is normal, experiential, psychological experiences in everyday life in the UK, I'm afraid. And yes, there is a lot of distress in society. We could all be a lot happier. And if we were a lot happier, we'd be a lot kinder. And Clive, I can see you've never failed to be kind on any occasion when I've met you. So I take it that you must be very happy leading the BWA. And Graham, equally, when you come to organisations which aren't happy places, it's probably because there's some distress which is not being recognised or identified within that organisation, which is causing that internal working population distress. And that's when you get more people saying, I don't like it, mental health problems, more ill health, longer off when sickness absence, more absence management, less productivity. So if you're seeing all these factors, there's got to be some internal distress in a working population. So go and find out why that is and exercise some critical thinking as to how you can address these points. We'd all love to solve the problems we can see because we've got an easy solution to those. It's the problems we don't know about or don't really want to confront that requires your innate professional critical thinking to address these needs and support people to identify that their needs are being met by how you're changing and progressing their method of working. So critical thinking is critical to your business. I will pause for breath there now. And, the other thing I can say we appreciate is this is new stuff to a lot of people. And if you want anybody, Clive, wants a 20-minute call with me or something like that, just to push around some ideas, do some problem solving without the constraints of anything and without a hard sell either. More than happy to afford people who are members of the BWA some ideas of how we can improve the sort of psychological prospects of their workforce and in that respect. So I'll sort of over to you, Clive, with that open-ended offer, which as always is gratis for your members.
Absolutely, Grant, and thank you. We'll absolutely take you up on that offer, and we'll share that. Excuse me, with the members, Graham. But I think listening to you, I think you touched on it, insightful and progressive. I think that was a great both. I thought that was really, really insightful, really progressive. But actually, on the other hand, really quite simple and basic, which is while I was listening to you, and we talk in other avenues of what we do about getting close to customers, getting close to suppliers. what you're promoting there, in very simple terms, is get close to your employees and understand your employees, and that's the message, underlying message that's come across to me today. And if you do that, then yes, you'll be able to see and deal with these issues that either do or do not exist. So I think that was very insightful, very helpful, and we will definitely spread the word, Grant, because I think we can help spread this message, which is a simple message in terms of my own kind of conclusion to what you've explained very articulately. So yeah, we're really keen to support that messaging, and get employers and businesses closer to their employees, to fundamentally understand them in a much better rounded way.
That's true. I heard it. There was one employer who embraced this. Some people will live in denial. We do a lot of that in the UK. But one of the very successful employers just went and spoke to his staff, and he says, I don't know, have you ever thought about it? But we're all in the same boat, rowing together here. Why wouldn't we all pull in the same direction? And then when they put it like that, people started sort of nodding and saying, well, actually, that makes sense. Why wouldn't we all pull in the same direction? So, well, OK, well, let's look at that then. So and of course, he didn't. I think we sometimes people anticipate that they're going to be met with a whole barrage of unassailable demands, which are unrealistic. But actually, human nature is, let's get the basic fundamentals that meet our needs first. And we're too busy worrying if we might offend people just by asking the question.
Yeah. No, I think that's really good, and a simple messaging, which I like. So, Kirsten, I mean, I know you're the only attendee on.